Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much to the organisers for the opportunity to tell you about some of the work that we've been doing that we think is very relevant to the problems that have been raised. And the more we hear, the more we think it's very relevant. Because I think nearly all of the problems that have been identified so far are things that we have already considered. And in some cases we have developed solutions. So we've called our collaboration, the collaboration is between the people who created what is known as EasyLift, which is Claire and I, and Spectral 360, which is a company that's a spin-out from Staffordshire University. And we've called this collaboration TRACES, to stand for Trace Retrieval and Automated Characterization and Evaluation System. The one part that we can't do is the microscopy. And that is something that I want to make sure that we reach out to all the people who offer microscopy. Please contact us at the end, because I think we've got something to offer and I think it would be great to work together. So I'm going to tell you about the collaboration, what we have to offer, what our technologies are that we've developed, and then conclusion. So Avitech is the brand name that's in front of the technology that's known as Spectral 360, and Spectral 360 is a company, as I said. EasyLift is a tape that we've created to get around the problems associated with birefringence of tape and also the absorbance in the UV. And it also gets around a lot of the problems associated with handling tapes with gloves. And I'd like to thank Kevin Porter at the back, who is our supplier, and we work very closely with Kevin's team, and I have to say they are superb. So what they do is they design and manufacture EasyLift, and through them we can make adaptations as needs be for this project or elsewhere. So what we offer is the forensic tape development in conjunction with Techman, which is where Kevin Porter it's his company. Image processing, which is the Spectral 360 you'll hear about later. Expertise in database creation. Inferential data analytics, and I think this is a crucial part that we have forensic backgrounds. And so we have a deep understanding of the forensic challenges, and particularly in fibres, but in general trace evidence. And we've, through this, we've been able to develop solutions to a lot of the problems that are faced. So in terms of I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but our forensic connections are deep and wide. One of for example, Claire quite rightly wanted me to mention that the National Chief Police Council, which is all of the heads of police in England and Wales, Claire works with them on nationwide validation studies to do with all sorts of things, not just fibres, but we just published a major paper on fibre evidence retrieval in the connection with validation. So our technologies, we believe, are relevant, highly relevant. They're patented as well. EasyLift, we believe, is ready to use as is with the shuttle system, but it can be improved, and we would hope that you would work with us to do that. Spectral 360 is a powerful image processing system, and it has a lot in common with what we heard about before, but it also has a very novel aspect to it, which we think makes it particularly applicable to this problem. So over to Claire to tell you about EasyLift.
Hello, everybody. I know some people in here, and I should imagine that some people have already heard of EasyLift. In fact, may have even had commented about this and gave us feedback over the years. I've brought a roll with me, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how it was developed, its attributes, and how we feel this might actually fit the SHUTTLE project, and also some of the flexibility that is inbuilt in the system that we've created along with Techman to allow for it to be flexible for whatever this shuttle system might actually look look like. So I'll give you a bit of an overview, and you can always ask more questions at the end. But what I'm trying to do is tell you about a development that's actually took 9 years. This was not a quick tape creation, and it's certainly taken some time because we really wanted to make it fit for purpose. We wanted to ensure that globally we had contacted forensic providers, we'd worked directly with police forces, and I've just put a few up here now, some logos. In fact, you're going to recognise some of these logos. And we've done it in different ways. So some of these partners were in the original sort of, or like the development, the creation, and the sort of initial prototyping, what is required. And then some of these might be just providing feedback from a CSI point of view, so at crime scenes, or providing some feedback from a laboratory point of view, so that ultimately we can try and make this as best as it can be. If you, top-class tape is basically what we're aiming for. And some of these institutions and organisations have actually done quite a lot in-depth study of these. And I can't, if you're interested in the reports, by all means, so one of them I'll just put up on here, which is Contact Traces, which is a UK organisation that used to focus on fibres and other trace. So, what are we saying? Why does this fit the shuttle project? So, at the moment, we can see what we've got here, it's just in this bag, is we've got a roll. It can be any size at this point, and this is the version that's got perforations. So you can actually break this down into whatever size you like, but if you wanted to break it down to a smaller size for a mini tape, or so that enables this to go onto a microscope slide, it can do that. But the best part of it is it doesn't have to be that size. So it can be A4 if that's where the maximum this is going. But it can also have adaptations to improve handleability. So at the moment, we have got tabs that are present on here that means that you don't get the glove to tape stickiness at crime scenes. But if you wanted more rigidity, you wanted a greater tab, or you wanted a different labelling system, that is how it's been designed, that we could change that. So it's fit for purpose. We also make pre-cut ones, as well as just sort of perforations, because in the UK, there is some of our police forces have a preference for pre-cut that has a little window on there, so we can individually use those. So that is sort of the logic behind why we've got those different on a roll or pre-cut versions at the moment. And of course, it can be made in very small batches, large batches, and all of this is in links with TechMan, and you'll hear about TechMan after this, but essentially it's about that design phase and then making sure that we can actually implement even the novel attributes that we really want. We can be really bespoke, is the point. So this is some of the feedback. So this ease of use of crime scenes, it initially got trialled through Staffordshire Police. So we've got a formal partnership with Staffordshire Police. They took this to crime scenes, and we're trying to understand actually how could this be improved. So they kicked that off. But then subsequently, Cambridgeshire, so Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire Police have got a joined forensic science centre approach, and they wanted to take this further to be able to use it as a triage tool. So to be able to take EasyLift, allow initial screening, and then from that gain intelligence information to feed into their forensic strategy and their policing strategy. And this is it was a long-term trial, and part of that also enabled us to develop this further. So what did they want as CSIs, and in a triage system from a tape that inevitably ends up something like this, or the next steps. So these are just some feedback that's on here. But what I think is interesting is that there's two types of feedback that we got when we developed this, very much from a laboratory point of view. So what are we interested in? Are we interested in that this is a multi-trace tape? Absolutely. We're really interested in this, is it good for pollen? Is it soil? So some people gave us that. We're interested in being able to keep something in situ and allow further analysis. So of course we took that forward. But from the crime scene point of view, it's very much about handleability, storage, usability, and it makes sense, doesn't it? So, and large-scale use and storage, which is taking us from where we were and then where we're going with this. So some of the problems that got mentioned earlier, this is been designed to overcome those issues. So we want a tape to have non-birefringent material. So we want it to be optically transparent if we're going to observe samples under polarised light. And this is the initial patenting, it was initial drive for the development of this tape. And I'll just show you a quick image here. So what we have is fibre in Enterlam in the mountains. And then what we've done is we've put it under cross polars. So we've got this, clearly this is a very nice surrounding to analyse a fibre. And then we've added easy lift tape on top and seen actually what have we got in terms of birefringent material. And although there's a couple of little dots on there, other than that, we've got actually what is quite a nice background for analysis. I think that's probably, does that make sense? That's okay. So that's one of the issues, isn't it? So let's overcome that. We also want to make sure that it allows further analysis in situ. So, and this again came from feedback from forensic providers, was actually how much can you do within the tape? Is it comparable with existing tapes for certain techniques, or does it go ahead? So we know we can do polarized light microscopy, but where exactly is the transmission maybe in the UV area? Is that a problem? Can we do microspectral photometry in situ? And what about Raman spectroscopy? So is that okay? So wherever possible, we're really interested in seeing other people's data on this. We're trying to be unbiased. We want to see other people test these. And there's been a lot of testing generally about what is the best tape, what's a good tape. One of these reviews is the Netherlands Forensic Institute, looked at 25 tapes, sequentially looked at the optical properties to decide whether it's birefringent, does it have any fluorescence issues, and the ones that didn't, that were suitable, were moved forward, and there was two. One of them was Easy Lift, one of them was Avery Dennison. And then the further analysis of that was observing actually what's the transmittance now between 200 and 700 nanometers. And unsurprisingly, quartz in comparison to their quartz is great. Easy Lift sort of there next to that. Then we've got glass, and then we've got the DOL 1460 Avery Dennison. So that gives us some information about how good its transmission is for further analysis. Contact traces actually looked at this further in terms of can we do MSP and Raman spectroscopy, and we particularly asked them, is this comparable to normal tape? Is there any issues? And basically the conclusion was absolutely comparable to normal tape. So just an example, there was multiple fibres that they chose for comparison between on the tape and then in Enterland, and we see on the right-hand side we've got everything in red. Sorry, the writing's a little pixelated there. Anything that's in red that was in Enterland, anything that's in black is from the tape, and they said it was perfectly valid for analysis. And then with Raman, the comment was it's perfectly acceptable that it allows interpretation of the fibre, and when run against their databases, they were able to accurately identify the composition, and that the tape was negligible in terms of its analysis. This was confocal Raman spectroscopy, just to go back to the point earlier. So other feedbacks that have said, well, that's fine, but sometimes you've got to get it out the tape. So if you're going to get it out the tape, what's the issues there? Does this leave a high residue, lots from the adhesive? Does it actually damage it? So I think it was mentioned yesterday around this, we want something that is quite delicate to the trace evidence, but at the same time sticky enough so that we can retrieve it with efficiency. So we looked into just some simple dissection studies, nothing too taxing, but we were interested in whether we could see that residue using Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. And what we see is we've got a negligible amount of residue present on there. So if I just sort of pop this on here, what we do have, I think we can see on the top, we've got on the mountant on there, we've got the adhesive on the red spectral. On the blue, we've got the fibre without, and then the yellow is a nylon, that same fibre that then's been extracted without cleaning. So there was no cleaning process put in between. And then we've just got a very, very small little legacy, if we can just see that where that peak is there. So nothing that actually would affect interpretation. We're also interested, of course, is this DNA compatible? So there are different ways that we can use this. This is compatible with different mounting mediums, and sometimes we've even used a small amount of heat to be able to bring the tape and its backing together in a way that removes air bubbles, so you get optically the best image for your trace evidence. And of course, if we're talking about that, we want to make sure that if we put in that heat or the system itself, is that okay with DNA? And so we've just done, this is ongoing work, but we have compared it to mini tapes, and it is directly comparable. So we can get a perfectly good DNA profile from different dilutions for DNA. So at the moment, it's indicating there's no real issues there. We have been, obviously, this is not just finished, because what we require is something to stick this on that allows that non-birefringent alternative so it can maximise its potential. So previously, and when we've been seeing it within trials, we've been using glass slides, and of course that's fine, but if we've got a large amount that's being taken from the crime scene, the fragility of these, the weight is going to be an issue. Also the size of these if we're going to A4. So an alternative is being sought, and the beauty of the setup that we have with TechMan is that these solutions are certainly surmountable. The problem's surmountable. So we're looking at a ultra-low OPD polymer backing so that we can actually basically stick this onto something that is transparent. And we were interested in what else can this do? So we're interested in with it being a multi-trace tape. We're also interested in sort of saying, okay, is there anything that we can get an indication of from a crime scene tape instantly to give us some intelligence? So we started looking at using this, embedding into the system presumptive testing for certain body fluids. I do apologise with the pixelation of this. Took this off a research poster, so but hopefully you can just see what we have here, and this one's probably a bit clearer here. We've worked out a system where we can embed this in a way that it can not only retrieve fibres and trace or any other kind of particulates, but at the same time, and this was up to a 1 in 10 to the minus 4, 1 in 10,000 dilution, there's something missing there, for us to be able to indicate through LMG that is present, which might help if we're co-collecting evidence and give some indication of what might be present from the surface that you've taped. That was a whiz through tapes, but if you're really interested in sort of learning a little bit more about it, so much more. You can probably imagine how long I can talk about this, given that we've been working on it for 9 years. So please feel free to ask you sort of afterwards, but I'm going to hand over. So there's a second element now. So think of it like bookends. We've got the tape at the beginning of the shuttle project, and of course, clearly further on, past the microscope, we've got the image processing. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mohammed here.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Mohammed Sidqi, Technical Director for AVA Technologies. I've been actually researching and developing what we call it image processing and video processing solutions for the last 16 years. Actually, what the market started for what we call it now video analytic 2007, and we started as the company AVA Tech 2011. So AVA Tech, we have, of course, AVA stands for Adaptive Video Analytics. So we refer to our video analytics solution as adaptive, which can adapt to different illumination conditions, different scene structures, as I'm going to try to explain to you today. We have mainly 4 products at the moment. So we got what we call it AVA Protect for critical infrastructure protection. We have AVA Detect, which is for detect objects, which is mainly for intruder detection and the like. We have AVA Count, which is people and vehicle counting solution. And we have AVA Analyze. So AVA Analyze actually includes majority of these functionalities together, and is mainly for police forces, where we offer what we call it video forensic solution for them, as I'm going to describe. So for today, I think the more relevant solution actually is AVA Analyze, which allows us to detect objects and to extract useful information from the object itself, physics-based information, as we're going to see, and being able to detect this object, segment the object from a background, and analyze this object, classify it, for example, or in some application, tracking the object, and sometimes as well, classifying the movement of the object itself. So we have been working with a number of institutions and organizations, including Stoke City, for example, Council for Smart City Solutions, and Leicester City Council, and environmental agencies, as well as Defense and Science and Technology Laboratory, MOD. We developed a solution for critical infrastructure protection. We have been working with police forces like Staffordshire Police and Leicestershire Police, and NHS. We have been doing some passenger counting solution for transport for London and London Underground. Again, you cannot see the synergy, again, like what my colleague said before, that between video analytic and surveillance application and what we're talking about today, but actually I'm trying, and actually, again, listening to my colleagues what have been saying today, I can see lots of synergies, and the same technology can be used for the same, for different applications, in this case, this application. So just to give you an indication, so this, as you can see, degraded video from police forces. This is a real video, by the way. Is I want to detect someone going out from this gate and summarize this one. So this is going to be thousands of hours, and the police investigators, they need to just stop and start recording based on this event. And as you can see, lots of movements, but our system, and I'm going to explain the reason, so our system can detect only the real or the required information and disregard all the other motion which are not required to be detected as motion. This is what we developed for Defense Science and Technology Laboratory. So we got a fixed camera, pan-tilt zoom camera, and Google Map. And I can see lots of actually things can be replicated for shuttle project or toolkit based on that. So the fixed camera can detect object of interest, and then the tasks directly the pan-tilt zoom camera to go and track this moving object. As you can see now, it is tracking the faraway object from there. And this is, by the way, a patent technology. And the other patent technology we got, which is what we call it camera calibration technology, which is for object localization. So at the moment, this is used manually. So the operator needs to do this camera calibration once at the start of the operation by putting the GPS location of the camera itself and by selecting 4 markers from the Google Map image and and matching for them to the actual field of view of the camera. But I can see this one can be applied for the same, by adding markers now automatically to the slides. And based on that, you can detect these markers and you can move from one platform to the other platform and being able to locate the object from one platform to the other platform. This is what we developed for Leicester City Council and Welford Street there in Leicester City, and you can see the detection and classification of the object and the count, and plotting this one on Google Map as well. So this for different region of interest, as we call them. So these vehicles here, for example, here pedestrians, bikes in this area, based on their requirements, of course, and pedestrian crossing on the other area. So we've got 4 counts, as you can see, and dividing the area or the field of view of the camera into multiple regions of interest. Yeah, so what we do, we do what we call it, and this is a differentiator between us and others. Most of other algorithms, computer vision algorithms, they get the output from the camera, which is the red, green, and blue pixels values, and they do the analysis directly. And they try to compensate for illumination changes. What we do is totally different from this point of view. We start by applying what we call it image formation models, and these are physics-based models. And these physics-based models allows us to separate between illumination and surface spectral reflectance, which are signature for materials. And based on a database of materials coming from a spectrometer and applying principal component analysis on them, so we can make use of this pre-trained data in order to extract the surface spectral reflectance as a signature for the material. So what we do is we estimate the illumination first of all. So for each and every frame or image, of course, we estimate the illumination condition of the scene. This allows us to adapt directly to any change. And for the sake of this project, this allows us to work cross platforms. So if you are getting this sample from this microscope with this illumination illuminant or illumination source, and you go to the same sample but different or similar sample but in different microscope, different platform, and different illumination source. So this technology will allow you to estimate the illumination and based on that adapt or normalize the image in order for it to be acceptable. So as a database, this is what you need. You need normalization for all the images to work cross platforms. The other thing, which is the extraction of physics-based feature, which is again unique to our computer vision modules, which is, so in our case, for example, surface spectral reflectance and surface spectral transmission. So this is we got, and what we have done actually, we have managed to do it in real time. This technology is, by the way, well established for a number of decades, has been used for what we call it color reproduction, but it used to take a long time to be executed or processed. What we have been doing actually, we managed to do it in real time for video application. What we do as well is image enhancement and tone mapping. And in lots of applications, especially in what we're talking about today, we need really to enhance the image for the operator or for the investigator, and sometimes as well for the computer vision algorithm for the later stages. And we need to do segmentation, which is segmenting foreground or the object of interest from the background itself, and do what we call it object detection. Object detection, we do it in two different ways, and I'm glad that this question has been asked in the previous session. So we do it based on motion, like what I have shown to you now, and we are doing it based on machine learning as well, deep learning. So without the need of any motion, so from one image or from multiple images, but there is no need for the actual movement of the object itself, we can directly detect the object of interest based on, again, training data set, as I'm going to explain. Localization, and this, again, another patent technology. So, of course, the first two, we got patent technology, and the localization, another patent technology, which allows us to locate the object over multiple different, let's say, platform or different settings. So Google Map, for example, to a camera field of view and the like. And we can do the tracking, and the tracking can be done within one fixed camera or multiple cameras, or like what I showed to you, fixed camera and pan-tilt zoom camera, and controlling the pan-tilt zoom camera to focus into the object of interest. And finally, using our biologically inspired machine learning algorithm to do the classification. So what we have developed for police forces in the UK, video forensic solution. And this video forensic solution used to get the video footage from video management softwares, and then used to, what we offered actually, object detection, object tracking, and then the analytics and the report. And then based on that, we have a list of events and passing this one to the viewer or the police investigator. So as you can see, this is our graphical user interface for the analytics, separate from the one used by the police investigators. So this generates all the reports. So actually, lots of cases. So one case, for example, 3,200 hours, for example, and then you pass it, and you get list of 60 cameras, for example, for this case. You got lists of events. And then these events are passed to another graphical user interface for investigator to use as a service at the moment. So this allows the investigator to load two different cameras. This is a list of all videos, list of cameras, list of all videos from these cameras. And automatically, because the reports have been already uploaded now to this software, then this graphical user interface will show for this video, we have two events. This video could be 10 hours video. And from these 10 hours, the investigator doesn't need to go through all 10 hours now. They can just jump directly. You will see here start time, end time. And based on that, by clicking to this one, it's going to go direct to the event. It's going to synchronize the event with other cameras. Most likely in these events, you got multiple cameras. So it can move from one camera to the other. So you can see what happened in this camera for this event, and then moves you to the other camera, and or the other way around, of course. And based on that, you got the assurance that you haven't missed anything. So this one solution we have been offering for Staffordshire Police and Leicestershire Police. What we actually, in general, in machine vision, there are main challenges. And these are elimination variations. So like in this project, for example, you got samples from different platforms, even the same platform, different elimination settings, or surface spectral disparity, so lots of materials. So we're going to talk about blood here, DNA, talking about fibers and so on. So different surface spectral or surface transmission, and suitability for real-time application. So we need your solution to be in real time. Of course, we are talking about now big data, huge amount of data. So not necessarily real time, but the processing time to be reasonable in a way we can do the processing in enough time or convenient time. To be cost effective, of course, and to be the main problem, of course, incompatibility with other sensors. And what we have been tackling in AVA technologies. So we based our first patent and main technology, which is Spectral C60 itself, on what we call it physics-based image formation model. And this means that for any image to be formed, which this is the image, so this is the real scene itself, so the illuminant, and then hitting the surface of the material, returning back two components, specular and diffuse, and the specular component got information about the illuminant itself, and the diffuse component get information about surface spectral reflectance. Normally, computer vision scientists, they just get the image, do the processing, try to compensate for the illumination. In our case, we don't do that. We actually separate between the specular and diffuse. From the specular, we got the information about the illumination in terms of what we're going to call it correlated color temperature, based on physics models and computational models, of course. And we separate as well. After we separate now the illumination, we make use of the surface spectral reflectance, in a way converting normal image, which is the output of a CCD camera, RGB camera, into a full spectrum image. And then processing this one in real time as well. So this is the most important bit. So this is what we do here, of course, take into consideration the models for the elimination and models for different materials. And I believe by building database for this, in SHUTTLE, for example, project, this will allow to do very, very similar thing, again, to build database for multiple materials like fibers and others. So this is the first step. You got a scene, and then you get the specular components, and then you calculate the correlated color temperature. This is actually measured. This is a data set which has got measured correlated color temperature, and this is estimated from the algorithm. And different ones, this is focused one, for example. So again, the measured is 4,800 Kelvin, for example, and the estimated one is 5,000 Kelvin. The second step is for each and every pixel from the image itself, we calculate, of course, we get rid of illumination now, and we calculate the surface spectral reflectance. So this is our surface spectral reflectance. Again, this is called Munsell dataset, and this is actually measured by a camera, of course, and measured by spectrometer. So the red one, you can see this is measured by the spectrometer, and the blue one, this is what the algorithm is estimating. So as you can see, there is a good estimation for this one. So what this allows us, it allows us to adapt quickly to any change of the environment, but for the sake of this project, it allows us to normalize the image, to allow us to use the same sample across multiple platforms and to compare between them and or different samples, but normalize the effect of the illumination. It detects, of course, camouflaged object under rapid illumination changes because we can adapt quickly to any change of illumination. Based on that, of course, it reduces false alarms and loss of missed detections. The other technology we have developed is what we call it Retina-inspired machine learning algorithms. So we are following actually the very similar structure, mimicking in a way, structure of the retina. So we got reds and cones, and having the surface spectral reflectance, this allows us actually to get a good estimate of the cones and rods. Based on that, we take and mimic the horizontal cells, bipolar cells, and ganglion cells. And based on that, we can apply this one to do image enhancement. So as you can see here, for example, you cannot see anything from this side. And based on applying this image enhancement algorithm, you can see lots of detail are revealed in a good contrast and allows us to see things you cannot see by the naked eye. And of course, if you pass it to another machine learning algorithm, this allows the processing to be much better. Another example, again, not only because dark, but as you can see, lots of actually features has been presented in a better way, so investigator or person can see much better information from the image itself. Yeah, so this one is referring to a graphical user interface, which is based on our technology, where we can enter any image, and based on this one, we can get spectral information from the image. And the image is a normal RGB image. So as you can see here, you can load from a databases, and then this gives you all the images in the database, and again, montage of all these images together, a preview, and then once you load the image itself, this will allow you to see the image itself and some information about it. If you go and select pick point, so you can select a point, and based on this selection of this point, you can see the surface spectral fluxes and others, and then start the analysis. You can do what we call it high dynamic range, for example, apply the image enhancement, and so on. So this is another user interface which we built. Again, so this is, for example, two images now for fibers. As you can see, not very good, actually, ones. But the projector is not showing really, but on the screen maybe shown better. But here, as you can see, this is the original one. This is after the enhancement. And the human operator can see this one with poor image, but with some enhancement. This allows us to get more information from the same image. So this allows the machine learning algorithm to detect the existence of two different fibers. And this, of course, what allows the machine learning to do is to see that there are pixels of varying colors and can segment between the background and foreground, and then can separate these two fibers. And with Spectral C60, we can do this separation, and we can do the correct illumination values, which allow us to get better analysis for these fibers. The last one, which is our classification algorithms, they are based on what we call it biological inspired machine learning algorithms. They are inspired from the visual cortex itself. So what we do is we we started actually this, by the way, all what I'm talking about now, research, have been, for example, this one have been for more than 6 years. We started by looking, of course, to the Retina, and these are a number of projects, but the actual classification starts from here, let's say. So the V1, which is the first visual cortex 1 in a way. So this doing the visual mapping, part of it depth estimation and edge detection and the like. And V2 is color constancy, and this actually what Spectral C60 is doing exactly, doing color constancy, which means allowing us to whatever change of illumination to be able to see the same colors. And what we have been mimicking is the V4 and the IT, which is a watt stream, what we call it the ventral stream or watt stream, which is doing the classification. And for videos, actually, I have been as well integrating what we call it the WARE, which is the temporal information. And we built models, and our models takes labeled data, and this is what we are trying to do in this project, applying actually deep learning and our bio-inspired machine learning algorithms. And then based on that, we get whatever testing data we want to apply to a trained model and do the classification, which is quite normal. But what we are trying to do, of course, based on that, of course, you get something like this. You got a scene, and then you got objects, and got information about the location of the object, and how far the object is from the camera. And this is, for example, the speed of the object itself, and the category of the object. So you can have more focused view of each one of them. So what we started by building a database of training data set. What our system can do, can build a model, train a model based on this data set. And then later on, if you got another data set, so another group, or later on new data are coming, so we can get this new data set and do what we call it transfer learning, which means updating our model with the new data set. And then based on that, you can, whatever test sample coming from the old data set or the new data set will be incorporated into our model. So this is mainly the part of the image processing. And I'll hand over now to my colleague, Andrea. Thank you.
Hello there. One of the important points is that we have a forensic background. And as with all of you who have such a background, you'll understand the importance of environmental prevalence. How common is it to find a particular type of trace in a particular environment? Because if you don't know that, you can't assess the evidential value. It's also important to understand the behavior of those particulate materials in the environment. So how do they transfer and how long do they persist? And it would also be very useful to know where things came from, which particular, if it was a fiber, which particular garment type it was used to manufacture, for example. Now that type of information, if we take fibers, is just not known because the databases don't exist because it costs too much to create the data. By this means, by automating it, you should be able to establish all three of these components. And when you've got this, it opens up an amazing opportunity. You can then start to build, I'm sure you know this because the consortium will have thought of this already, but you can use this for intelligence purposes. So you can then start to say, are we seeing linked scenes? What might the suspect be wearing? And we'll come back to why that might be valuable later to link to Mohammed's work. We can assess evidential value for a particular collection or of trace evidence for court-going purposes, and this can be done on the basis of the expert being informed by likelihood ratio information that is extracted from the database directly. In the United Kingdom, the police pay for the forensic work. And they don't pay for it if they don't think it's likely to work. So they try to carry out what's referred to as either triage or screening. And often the rules they use are informed by, I don't want to be at all rude about this, but they're not necessarily informed by the forensic scientists who will ultimately make the decision. They're informed by the custom practice of that force and what they've seen work in the past. And one of the things that this will enable you to do, if you have properly informed databases, to do this task in an informed fashion, a very informed fashion. So I just want to summarize some of the attributes of EasyLift to make it clear. So we're looking at optical clarity, that's available now, ease of use, now, lack of fragility, available now. Further analysis in the tape, yes, confocal Raman spectroscopy and MSP. Post-isolation analysis, yes, you can take your fibers out or whatever it might be and analyse them further. DNA, whatever it might be. Adhesive genital traces, yes, we can, through Techman, we can produce different levels of TAC according to what people want, different levels of adhesive state. In situ presumptive testing, we're developing that now, if that's of interest. A polymer slide to use instead of glass, we're developing that now. Contamination-free, yes, because the strict environment that Techman use, and adaptable to meet the needs of SHUTTLE, very much so. It also allows the potential for simultaneous recovery of fingerprint and other trace evidence. Now, at the moment, obviously, most crime scenes, fingerprints are developed prior to recovery, so you can see where they are. But if you've got a very serious event, such as a terrorism event, it might be very beneficial to be able to tape lift large areas, and when you're tape lifting, you capture both the fingerprint and the trace evidence, because if you dust for fingerprints, you lose the trace evidence, and you have to make a decision. And because the fingerprint is more valuable, you tend to dust, therefore you tend to lose your trace evidence. With this, you have the potential of having both. But obviously that's at the moment in development. I just want to quickly look at some of the problems that machine learning can address, and those that Spectral 360 have improved or allow to happen in a more efficacious fashion in some form. So data reductions. One of the things that we were talking about was you can have a huge amount of data. And clearly the technology has been developed by several companies that work in this area to handle large amounts of data, but nonetheless it will be a problem. One way of getting around that is to decide what are background traces, fibers for example, and which are the ones that are of interest. And you could, if it was a compromise that you needed to make, decide to only keep the images for the ones of interest. Now I understand Yarp's point about this, but if push comes to shove and you've got a choice between not having a functional database or one that only looks at the target ones, this can do it. So you capture it all, you look for the target ones, you only save the target images. So Spectral 360 will help with that because it improves the segmentation of background debris, and therefore it's digital, and it reduces depth of field issues because it is able to compensate to some degree for out of focus images. Image enhancement, machine learning I'm sure can do it, so these are bold statements, they're perhaps a bit oversimplistic, but in essence it doesn't do it well compared with Spectral 360, which is designed to achieve this even with poor images. So out of focus, poor illumination, low pixel density, these things that can be handled. Trace classification, they can do it, but there's an improvement with Spectral 360. Spectral mapping, yes, both. Modularity, interoperability between platforms. This is a crucial thing, I think. Imagine as a microscope manufacturer, you invest in this, you produce your microscope, it costs a lot of money, a lot of labs buy it to start with, and then 5 years down the line you've developed a new microscope. What you don't want to have is a situation where that can only be adopted if everybody adopts it, because all people's budgets are going to be out of sync. Also, you've got a forensic expert who wants to look using their own microscope, not designed for this shuttle system, but their own microscope to double check. And what you want to be able to do is integrate all those into a single system. And because of Mohammed's advance in this area, that is entirely possible because the different illumination conditions can be corrected for, so you've got them on the same level playing field. And that allows this modularity that we were talking about for interoperability, therefore allowing future proofing as well. It will capture spectroscopic information, as we've seen. And the other possibility that it has, although this isn't Spectral 360 directly, is it can be used to control zooming. So if we're interested in a two-stage solution where one's done, your image is first captured at relatively low magnification, and you identify features of interest, this can be then sent back to look in detail at those parts of interest. This is what I did in a rush over. Yeah. It's got a concluding slide, I hope. Yep, there we have a concluding slide. I apologise for that. It's because I was a bit rushed over lunch. I think I'll hand over to Mohammed to finally conclude.
Yeah. I think, we built actually this group now to be able to address number of issues related to shuttle projects, so the easy lifting and image processing capabilities. On top of that, we have expertise in database, but of course, we don't have the actual infrastructure for it, and ideally to be hosted here in the EU. We don't have, of course, access to, we are looking for actual partner, microscopic equipment and stuff. So yeah, it was very, very good being here, and we really got very good insight in terms of the project, and very keen as well to be part of it. So, and open to questions, yeah, thank you.
You mentioned on the... Thank you. You mentioned on the slide before you have control on the zoom.
I think
That's
this is
digital
Mohammed's
zoom, or Mohammed, this is digital zoom, not control on a microscope.
No, it is not digital zoom. Not necessarily. Actually, that's what I showed in the video, the other video. It is not digital zoom. This is a painted zoom camera where it can actually control a motor or the actual motorized.
Okay.
Yeah. So not talk about digital zoom here, but could be of course. But no, I talk actually about actual.
I'm just thinking of having that somehow on a microscope.
Yeah. But it can be applied in both. But actually, what I showed in the other one, which is
okay.
static camera, can control a pan-tilt zoom camera. So it could be, of course, digital zoom as a very straightforward one, or of course, could be a motorized one.
So it might
Thank
be
you.
a step change using different
Yep.
objectives
Yep.
rather than a smooth zoom.
I have two questions. One in regard to the tape. So is it DNA free as well, or?
I'll ask my colleague from Techman, but in essence, I don't believe you have DNA-free labs, do you? No. So how we envisaged, it will definitely have very low DNA because it's a very clean environment. But we would have to, if we're going to produce it in this way, we would have to take control samples from the people who worked in the environment to make sure that any DNA that did get transferred we could assign to those people. And the other thing that we would do, of course, is batch control it so that you would test for DNA. Now, I don't imagine that any product that you buy can be guaranteed DNA free.
I was just curious because I think these questions arise more and more.
They do.
And therefore I'm just curious if you have found any solution for that.
No, well, the solution is one of extreme cleanliness followed by checking. That is the solution. But it's not a perfect solution. I don't think there is a perfect solution for it.
I think as well, but yeah, so I'm wondering if there was any. The other one goes to you. So I'm just curious how many sets of data are needed to train the system to get an information with a, very high certainty and reliability.
Yeah, we're talking mainly about thousands of samples, but of course, the more data, the better, of course. But to start with, we're talking about thousands of samples, labeled one, of course, for the same object you want to classify or class. And yeah, so these we're talking in terms of thousands of them, yeah.
Mohammed, could I ask you a question about this? I think there's another dimension to this as well. Am I right that your system has a training set and then a refining set? So that if you have a system, say you have fibres which have a lot in common, or glass which has a lot in common, you train it initially on many thousands, and then if you need to adapt to a new type of glass, say it's a slightly different colour that you're really interested in, you can train on a few hundred, and it updates the previous model. So it's a means of once you've established a class, you can then train it much more effectively. So
But what I heard is that you need at least 50,000 sets of data, or even more than that, at least, yeah.
But when you consider, but when you consider how many background fibres, for example, you get when you tape lift, establishing a training set wouldn't necessarily be a problem, and there isn't. Well, because when you take a tape lift of a particular garment, you automatically create a lot of background fibers. Now, the challenge, of course, is to know that they are background, but there's a lot there.
I think the challenge is that you have to classify them all.
You have to be able to label them all as background, but if that can be done, well, I should hand over to Mohammed about things like error. So if you could do that by colour, for example, but there's a few that are wrong, a small percentage, what effect would that have on the...
Yeah, you need, yeah, of course, we need, it all depends again whether you want interclass and interclasses and so on. So you have lots of other varieties. But if you have only few classes, assuming, for example, I don't think this is the case for this project, but you need only few hundreds, yes. If you got, like, for example, what we do for surveillance, for example, and generic application, we have more than 9,000, up to 10,000 classes. So in this case, yeah, you need a lot of data, of course. And you need, of course, to... One of the technologies we use, of course, is not only classification, it's actually detection and classification. So it finds the object from the sample, for example, and then do the classification. In this case, it disregards the background, and then we don't need really a segmentation process as such. It helps, of course, to have the segmentation, but if we apply, if you got the enough data to be able to build a good model for the class and the interclass, then we will be able to, based on that, to detect directly and segment the object based on the machine learning algorithm automatically.
Mohammed, could I ask you another question
Yes,
about that?
yeah.
So the other question is it possible to augment a data set of labeled images by using programmatically generated images, CGI?
Yeah, again, I'm not sure if in the context of this project, I think we're going to need real data, but yeah, but it could be semi-automated in a way, the operation, so it can help a mechanism for segmentation, can help to do the labeling and prepare the data itself, yeah, for the database, for the training data set. Yeah.
This is not a question, maybe just to complement your answer. You were right. You need huge amounts of data, hundreds of thousands, if you want to squeeze maximum out of deep learning. I mean, this is the deep learning must, you know. And of course, this is a big challenge. In some areas, you get so much data. In data mining, in certain areas, you get millions of data items. But in this particular field, it's very expensive. It's very difficult. So what we usually do, we do expand the training set artificially, but this is a very tricky task because you can also negatively influence the outcome. So what we do, we have specific techniques how not to actually influence the training set in a negative way, but still get many different variations, small variations of the training set. So I mean, thousands is not enough, at least from our expertise. It would not really make deep learning efficient.
Yeah, yeah. You need, of course, much data. Yeah, but minimum you need to start with 1,000 to have a model which allows you to do the discrimination between different classes. Yeah. For example, in our cases for the video surveillance, when we want to classify between two categories, vehicle and pedestrian, for example, hundreds would be enough to give good to start with good classification, let's say. But whenever we increase the number of classes, in this scenario, most likely going to have, I don't know, hundreds maybe of classes. So in this case, yeah, you need thousands and thousands of samples, yeah. Especially it is a bit tricky as well, not very straightforward. So unlike the classification of things which you can directly recognize by shapes and so on, so I believe you're going to need more, of course.
Well, you mentioned a very large number of classes. That's far bigger than I would imagine. I would think, well, we have the sand and the glass and the fibers and maybe some subdivision, but if that would add up to 12, maybe 15 classes, I would be quite happy.
Yeah, in this case,
that's not hundreds.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned for this project I would suspect myself less than 100. Yeah, but yeah, for surveillance and for generic ones, we have we got models now trained for more than 9,500 classes. But of course, hence the data. But again, there is other challenge actually here to get the. So still we're gonna need lots of data. But yeah, the good thing will help that we got few classes. But you got inter classes as well. So and inter classes. So we want to differentiate most likely in one class. Under this class, going to be subclasses. Yeah.
Can I just...
Is one of the classes you can have unknown? Is that one of the classes you can have?
Actually, yeah, this is what we are doing, which is a bit different than others for the bio-inspired one. So what we have is, we have what we call it unknown, and based on this unknown, we let the system try to learn something new. And this is kind of closing loop or feedback loop. And this is, but in general, no, the unknowns, unless you put all the unknowns in one category and pass it to the system, but not very effective. But if you can, of course, combine all the unknowns, which is unlikely to be the case. But in our case, no, we design it in a way that we have an unknown one, and the unknown one actually triggers the system to ask for help to get the identification of this new class.
This is what I was imagining you might start with. There's a small number of classes. So you might not have cotton, various other types, but you might have fiber, sand, glass, and just have a few, and then within that you can have unknown classes later on, and they can be fed by the experts who can label it as time goes on, so that it would not be such an onerous task.
But I want to just add something here. When we talk about classes, I will give you an example of drone detection that we've done. We had two classes. One was drone, another one was bird. Later on, we added more classes. Yeah, so we started with two. We still needed tens of thousands of samples for drones. Why? Because you have a drone, certain type of drone with certain color. That drone looks different when it's taken from different angles. It looks different with different lighting. Of sun or without sun or during raining. You need all sorts of examples of that particular one drone. And this is one class. Now you have different types of drones with different colors, different shapes. So even if we have two classes, we still need loads of data. Okay? So I would not really say, okay, few classes, that means we don't need a big training set. We need a big training set.
Yeah, for sure, yeah, no doubt about it. But again, it is comparable if you got thousands of classes or you got only few classes. So this is what I'm referring to. But we still, of course, we need a lot. But as I mentioned from our experience, yeah, to start with, of course, but most of the time for video surveillance, whenever you set the camera in a certain view, field of view, you might need to add extra training data from this view itself. I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
But to start with classification, so if it is just few classes, in our cases, yeah, up to 1,000 or few hundreds, it works to start with, but it is not really to give the best performance. If you manage to get more data, for sure. For deep learning, actually, you need much, much more. I'm talking about the bio-inspired machine learning algorithm. We are using both of them, by the way. But whenever, of course, we have more classes, we need thousands and thousands of training data sets. I agree with you.
You need to start with something, exactly.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But it's possible to expand it artificially. It is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It is possible to do what we call it transfer learning as well, which means you build a model and then you add other training data set, you go for another phase of training to actually complement the original one and so on.